Hi there, this is Aina from Taproot Tarot, and I'm really excited about this video because we're going to clear up a lot of confusion around the Tarot Classic deck. This, along with the one JJ Swiss, was one of the first tarot decks distributed by US Games. The story goes that Stuart Kaplan, who was already an accomplished game company owner, was traveling in Europe and came across a tarot deck. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if the first one was one JJ Swiss or this one, but he absolutely fell in love and decided to start producing these decks through his game company. We can see here, this is made by AG Müller for distribution by US Games. But this was, in the early 70s when tarot history, a lot was known about it, but it was definitely more vague than, the knowledge we have today. The Tarot Classic was printed for the purpose of accompanying this book. I believe this is Stuart Kaplan's precursor to his forthcoming encyclopedias. And it's a really cool book. It has, it's a nice primer for tarot history. It has a really great chapter on, the various esotericists who popularized tarot reading. It has a bunch of line drawings of various decks, so it's a cool book. In it, though, there's not very much about this deck specifically, other than using it to illustrate the divinatory meaning section. But he caused a lot of confusion because both the Little White Book for the Tarot Classic itself and this book states that the Tarot Classic cards illustrated in chapters 4 and 5 of this book are based upon the designs of Claude Burdel, with slight modifications by the artists at Müller and Company in Switzerland. And he says this with the line drawings of the Burdel pictured right next to it, and we can see pretty clearly that it's a lot more than just slight modifications to these cards. They're actually quite a bit different. I don't have a Burdel on me. The one I have is the Universal Tarot de Marseille by Lo Scarabeo. But I think we're all pretty familiar with that deck. And I've already got plenty here to compare, so let's not make it too complicated. So at that time, the Swiss pattern or tradition as a derivative of the Tarot de Marseille had not been yet labeled or named. And even, very recently, it hadn't been. So a lot of people have speculated maybe Kaplan knew that this being a Swiss pattern deck just kind of was indirectly based on the Burdel. But the way he has it written in there, it really sounds like he thought that the artists at AGM had a copy of the Burdel and redrew it into this Tarot Classic deck. And that's not the case. So who did design this deck? It was Joseph Henri Rochias of Switzerland. There are quite a few tarot decks out there attributed to Rochias because there were 3 generations of card makers under that name, starting in the late 1700s in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. With Joseph Henri's grandfather, Francois Rochias. The company at Card Making Workshop was then left to Jacques Rochias. And he passed away when Joseph Henri was a child, and so the company was run by Jacques' widow until Joseph Henri was able to take over the company, and that was maybe from about 1835 to 1851. The woodcutter or engraver Jean Proche was employed by Jacques Rochias, and we can assume he continued to work under Jacques' widow as well as Joseph Henri. All this information is coming from a bunch of sources. I'll link everything in the description if you're interested in exploring further. But a lot of these details are from Thierry de Paulus, a kind of a tarot history legend, in an email to the British Museum. Now, we do have a copy of Joseph Henri's original deck in the British Museum, but the only surviving copies are ones that were printed by a later card company called Schaffhouse, which was located in Schaffhausen, Switzerland. And because of that, this deck tends to be called by tarot historians the Schaffhouse deck. I'm a little unclear if the one in the British Museum is an original Joseph Henri or if it is a Schaffhouse deck. And oddly enough, the 2 of coins, which would give us that information, is missing from that deck in the British Museum. But the colors are just about the same as what we see in this one. So let me explain what these decks are. So this one to the right is the Tarot Classic, put out in 1971 by AG Müller and Stuart Kaplan, or US Games, in conjunction with this book. This one is a 1980 reprint of AG Müller's original print of this deck, and this came out, oh, this says 1990. Yeah, correction, it says 1990. I was thinking 1980. And this one I didn't even know existed until pretty recently. I saw it on the channel Second Thoughts from the Mission, who posted a really great Tarot de Marseille collection video, and I will post a link to that in the description as well. Now, for a long time I've been aware of the Cartomancer's reprint of this, who I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Cartomancer is the same as Lauren's Retro Repros, so there might be an earlier print of that before she started printing through Big Cartel. But this is a print from a deck in the collection of Sumada, which is a moniker of another tarot history person. I'm not remembering their real name off the top of my head. But this one is dated both 1860 here and 1890 here. I am inclined to think the 1890 date is probably the correct one. And we'll talk about why as we discuss the history of these cards. So all of these are printed by Schaffhouse, which was later acquired by AG Müller. And we'll talk details on that in a minute. If the one in the British Museum is Joseph Henri's original printing, then the colors are about the same. But it's possible there's a completely different earlier version from Joseph Henri Rochias himself. Now we do have a deck here that is attributed to Joseph Henri Rochias. I'm not positive that's accurate because it is dated here. This is a Deviant Moon production. It's dated 1816. And as I mentioned earlier, Joseph Henri Rochias didn't take over the workshop until 1835 or thereabouts, and his father's death, the death of Jacques Rochias, wasn't until 1823. Now, these dates tend to be estimates, so I don't know the history. I'm not positive that this is a Joseph Henri deck. It could be a Jacques Rochias deck, but they come from the same workshop, so I thought it would be fun to include it in this comparison, and we can see what the 2 of coins from the original Joseph Henri deck, prior to it becoming the Schaffhouse deck, would have looked like. One interesting thing, I guess there were long rumors that the recoloration on the Tarot Classic version was done with colored pencils, and apparently at some point the lithographs, the original black and white line lithographs, were found with colored pencil coloration, so apparently that rumor was true. Now I actually love the original coloration. We have more of a lovely purple to it, and it's very multicolored. And I believe this purple is made from mixing this plum color with the blue. You can see wherever the purple happens, there's the blue and plum. You can kind of see the outline with that plum color there. And then of course the green as well is the blue overlaid by the yellow. So a clever way to get a more multicolored effect without having to do each color individually. And then this is a really interesting coloration. They're all very different. So this one is probably more similar to the Tarot Classic, but then we have the addition of this green here, kind of a pale salmon orange instead of this plum color. This deck, we'll see, does have some characteristics of the Swiss pattern, as well as some characteristics of Tarot de Marseille and some other regional variants. So we do have a cat here, whereas these appear more like dogs. And we can see each of the backs here. This back design, this plaid was a signature of the Schaffhouse printing workshop. So one can wonder, do we have these Schaffhausen decks to thank for the infamous plaid backs? This is the most horrific back ever made. It's very unfortunate. Oh well, what can you do? And then we have that plaid back, but the nice gold addition to it in the Tarot Classic. So the earlier Schaffhausen decks are labeled in French, and then it was the US Games version that was in English. I believe that could also be gotten in French as well. So we know that in about the mid to late 1800s, this deck was being printed by Joseph Henri Rochias. So where does the Schaffhouse come in? And we'll see in a little bit that these decks on the Two of Coins are labeled Schaffhouse. I'm not sure why it's kind of anglified like that. The city is called Schaffhausen in Switzerland, and it happened to be the site of major paper production. And so there was a card maker named David Hurter who decided to move his shop to that city. And in 1863, Johannes Müller purchased David Hurter's playing card factory. And interestingly enough, Johannes Müller's son, Johannes Müller Jr., married David Hurter's daughter, and they settled, and he took over management of the Schaffhausen card factory. Eventually, all of the Müller company's business, at least temporarily, moved to Schaffhausen. So there is a number of card decks, including the one JJ Swiss and this one, which indicate Schaffhouse on the Two of Coins. And of course, from there, AGM expanded, but maintained production in Schaffhausen. And even the Convos deck is a Schaffhausen production, interestingly. And we've got some Swiss characteristics with kind of a fancier scepter all the way across the board here. But we can see the line work in these three is exactly the same. This is interesting. Don't really know what's going on here, but whatever it is, it's covered up. Kind of made to look like a decorative drape instead of somebody's arm in both of the later AGM versions. So when I first started looking at this, I found a really fascinating thread, I think in the Aeclectic Tarot Forum. I will post that link in the description. It was started in 2008, attempting to find who the creator of this deck was. A little pause here to note that this Chariot card is labeled an 8, is mislabeled. And that was apparently the first run of the Schaffhausen production of this deck. Very shortly thereafter, there was a second run where the number was corrected. But you can see quite a lot of color variety across these three. And here we do see an indication that this is by either Jacques Rochias or Joseph Rochias. If the 1816 date is correct, that's got to be Jacques Rochias. But no such indication here. So this thread on the Aeclectic forum is really fascinating because one of the really interesting aspects of it is that the Swiss pattern is never mentioned, and I think that must be because it wasn't very well defined yet at that point, at least not in the English-speaking world. And so it's really interesting, you know, there's just this discussion on where this deck came from, and mention of the Burdell and the Gassman. And just the way it reads, you can just kind of tell that people were unsure of how all these decks worked together. Here's a very Piedmont style hermit with his cane and his hood that's up. So anyway, just reading through that old forum post was just really fascinating to kind of just consider, you know, the state of tarot history and what it must have been in 2008. The other really cool thing about that thread is that it gets resurrected, and in 2013, I think, Yves Renaud hops in. Oh yeah, everybody is just lamenting the fact that it's so hard to find images of the Burdell and the Gassman. And that's super interesting to think of now because you know, they're so accessible now. And toward the end of the thread, when it's resurrected in 2013, Yves Renaud jumps in and makes the announcement that he's about to print a Burdell in 2014. Presumably that would have been well before his Gassman was printed as well. So I just think it's really interesting to look back at these old forums and try to imagine what it was like when people were, you know, trying so hard looking through museum files. Somebody made a comment that there was another member on there who was so lucky to have both a copy of the Gassman and a Burdell, presumably original copies, and that they owned a scanner and could share those images with everybody. So we have it good these days for sure. Now we can see these three lions are exactly the same and super duper weird, but very similar to this lion. So you can kind of see how these two came from the same workshop, whether they were father and son or from the same card maker. Now this Rochias deck sticks to the TDM pattern, and the Tarot Classic sticks to the Swiss pattern. And this apparently was some German imagery that was incorporated into the cards. And interestingly, the Burdell, even though it's considered kind of a transitional Swiss pattern deck, sticks to the Marseille style pendu, and not the Swiss style. Now we used to kind of consider the Burdell, which was made in Switzerland, to be, you know, the regional transitional deck from the French style into the Swiss pattern. But now Masha has recently posted a video about another Yves Renaud deck. The son of Madinier apparently made a deck that has a lot of characteristics of the Swiss pattern, but it was made in France. So that just throws that idea out the window, apparently. So I will link that as well, because if you're interested in how these patterns developed, you've really got to check that out. So that thread, I've shared it with a bunch of folks who've asked about this deck before I knew that YouTube comments that include links tend to disappear into the ether. So if you and I have ever been in a conversation on YouTube about the Tarot Classic and the Schaffhouse deck, if I just disappeared from that conversation, it's because I probably left a comment that had a link in it and it disappeared. So if you're one of those folks that I've talked about this deck with, I hope you're here to learn a little bit more about it with me today. So this earlier deck, definitely sticking with the TDM French style devil, but the Swiss pattern style in the Schaffman Tarot Classic version. And same with the Maison-Dieu. I really love the multicolored look of the original Schaffhouse. I actually think the Tarot Classic is best executed here because she appears to be wearing more of like a headband, whereas in the earlier two, I think in this one it's more just the coloration. They just colored outside the lines a little bit, and so it looks like she's wearing a cap, and this one seems to interpret that as her wearing a cap rather than it just being a headband where they got the color outside the lines a bit. So I think it looks a little strange for her to be wearing a cap. And I just think a headband or like a little ribbon looks more appropriate. I do love her cool bangs in this. And in all of them, she seems to be holding some beer steins or something. Very similar moon cards, except in coloration. And of course these, the line work is identical, but here it's very similar. And your typical Marseille TDM, but we've got the hairy sun of the Swiss pattern in the Schaffhouse Tarot Classic version. I just cannot with these butt cheeks. We've got the same thing happening here, just the addition of dimples in the Schaffhouse. They're very just pronounced and kind of in your face. Quite different designs between the world cards of the older version and the Tarot Classic. And very different colors across these three versions. Now these three are not the only known versions of the Schaffhouse Tarot Classic deck. There are others out there as well. I don't know if AGM just did other printings with various colorations, but there are definitely others to be seen out there. I'll post any links that I have handy if you want to explore this a little further. A really cool and interesting Ace of Cups here, huh? Really nice details. But here, going right into the bulbous, rounded Swiss pattern goblet. And in the Two of Cups in this deck, we've got the JR, probably for Jacques Rochias, possibly for Joseph Henri. But notably, this one also has the Swiss-style trumpets, as with the Tarot Classic style. So like I mentioned, it's kind of a blend of different patterns, it seems like. All of these colors are just fabulous. I really like the subdued colors of this older deck, but man, all of these are just amazing. And I'd really love some confirmation on what the original coloration of this line work was in Joseph Henri's workshop. But I could never choose a favorite based on the colors between these three because I think they are all so cool. As far as cardstock goes, definitely this one. It's a nice linen cardstock. So we know that The original cards were printed in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, by Joseph Henri Rochias. So why are they all labeled as Schaffhouse cards, which you'll see once we get to the coins? That's a really good question, and the only thing I can find by looking at an old German text that I kind of had to translate with my phone, I don't know German that well, was that AGM even early in its history was printing historical decks in an effort to preserve Swiss historical tarot traditions, which is pretty cool that they were doing that even in the 1800s. Now again, this deck is often listed as being printed in 1860. The box for this one says 1890, but the Müller company didn't purchase the Schaffhausen card factory until 1863, so I doubt that the 1860 date is correct. Whether it's as late as 1890, I'm not sure. The only place I've seen that date is on the box of this deck. The court cards are some of the most fun, and these colors, like I said, for all of them are amazing. The nice thing about the Tarot Classic is it seems to be more color coordinated, so we've got some variation from suit to suit, whereas these stick to a more multicolored style throughout. So as far as I can tell, sometime in probably the late 1800s, AGM acquired a copy of Joseph Henri's deck and printed it for posterity. But if anyone knows something different or some more detailed history on that, please do let me know. And that goes for this entire video. I unfortunately didn't have the hours and hours that I would have loved to spend researching this, so I would love to hear any insights you might have. So here we have the fancy bunch of grapes hanging by a chain, and the decorative cuff here and extra flowers of the Swiss pattern, and we see that here in the earlier Rochias deck as well. Really distinct color coding in the Tarot Classic. Definitely more of that signature curly-Q kind of fanciness in these ones, signature to the Swiss pattern, as opposed to this, which is a more plain TDM. This is an interesting shape. And we see that across all of the Tarot Classic versions. I think it's so amazing how a deck from the 1800s can lend itself so perfectly to the 70s vibe. And that could be a big reason that people think that that this was a redrawing by Müller or AG or Kaplan himself from one of the older historical tarots, because it's kind of all of a sudden we just have this very groovy patterning that we don't see. And I think it's maybe emphasized a little bit more because of how multicolored it is. This one's really unique too. I'm gonna have to look more into this because we see a few Piedmont characteristics like the buckled shoes. We see Swiss characteristics. I'm going to have to take a closer look at it and see what other similarities to other patterns that I can find. Now this poor horse, those of us who adore the Tarot Classic are aware that he appears to have no ears. And if you look closely, you know, maybe there's some tiny little ears hiding in there, but no, for some reason, this poor guy just does not seem to have ears. They're kind of added in there. I don't know, I guess he's got an ear that's maybe covered by the orange coloring. I don't know, but he's got very tiny little ears. See that similarly here. Just a fun quirk of the Tarot Classic. This horse, luckily for him, has got some ears. But yeah, I just got this deck pretty recently. I haven't even had a chance to round the corners yet. So they're very spiky, and I will definitely be rounding them. She's possibly pictured here holding some gloves, whereas she could be holding possibly a scroll or a book, pamphlet or something. Do you have a favorite among these three colorations of the Tarot Classic? I don't know if I could ever choose just based on the color. I suppose if I really had to, I'd probably go with this one. It's just so festive. So in the original, or in the British Museum copy of this, like I said, the Two of Coins is missing. That deck is attributed on that entry to Joseph Henri Rochias, so it could be the original deck, and we just can't tell because we don't have the Two of Coins. If that original were to have a Two of Coins, it would probably look something like this, which, by the way, says Joseph Henri Rochias, and it says it's made in Neuchâtel, 1816. That's really interesting. It's very possible that those dates were incorrect, although I believe Thierry de Paulus looked at birth records and you know, business records and things like that to find them. It does look a little bit like that 6 doesn't belong. But what would be more likely is that this could have been printed originally by Jacques Rochias in 1816, and Joseph Henri added his name, but it really doesn't look out of place. Usually when that happens, you can see. So either our dates are wrong, which is always possible, or Joseph Henri fudged the date a little bit. That's also something that was done in order to extend credibility. An older date on the Two of Coins just kind of lent some authority to that card maker. So that's possible. I'm really not sure. Fascinating. But 1816, at that point, Joseph Henri would have been a child. So if Thierry de Paulus dates are correct. So that is super interesting. But here we have Schaffhouse with an anglicized spelling. The town is Schaffhausen, which is Schaffhausen. And it just says it's made in Schaffhouse. So that is the town that these are made in. And that was kept for the later versions, and was probably also true. Like I said, that Card Factory, as far as I know, is still running today, but it was at least running and active through the making of the Convos deck, which is more recent. And a lot of tarots have this attribution, such as the 1JJ Swiss. It kind of actually became a specialty of the Schaffhouse factory to start kind of switching over to tarot cards. So here we do not have the Swiss style, we have the French style, even with the fleur-de-lis, and we switch here to the Swiss pattern trumpets, and here we have the JR, which is probably for Joseph Henri Rochias, but could also have been adopted from earlier cards for Jacques Rochias, but it's often assumed that it's Joseph Henri Rochias. And this, in his Tarot Classic book, the M, Kaplan writes that's an M for Müller. I'm not sure if that's true. There's speculation that it was changed to M for Marilyn, the name of his wife. But these are both also printed by Müller, and they say JR, so it seems unlikely that they would have switched it, well, unless they switched it to Müller because they knew they were exporting it for US games. I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. So an M for either Müller or Marilyn or something else, who knows? But this is Joseph Henri Rochias. Fantastic colors all the way across. I think even these like kind of earthier ones are really appealing. Got the traditional Valet de denier on the side for all of them except for the later AGM version. And I like here they play along, but they change it to Page of Pentacles. It's hilarious that this is labeled Pentacles. But here they probably resized it, I suppose, and labeled it in French on the bottom. I love the scrawny little feather on the Swiss style one. I am fascinated by the choice to get less colorful for the 70s deck. Maybe it was mostly to color code the suits, I don't know. Interesting, here we see the stems starting at the bottom and coming out the top, the palm frond and the laurel branch. But here the stems are sticking out the top and hanging downward with an extra little laurel perhaps down in the corner there. And reversed for the Tarot Classic version. Alrighty folks, I better finish this up. I'm losing my light. It was kind of a last minute decision to include this fourth deck, but that adds a little bit of interest. Another layer to think about. Oh, and by the way, we see the TDM swords that have kind of indistinguishable hilts slash scabbards, whereas you can really see the hilt defined from the end of the scabbard, which is characteristic of the Swiss pattern. Really love this plum color here in the swords. Oops. Oh, I was way off. I think I forgot about this deck for a couple of cards there. Oh, I'm just a mess. Let's get these straightened out here. Alrighty. A little bit of an ermine pattern on the inside of his cloak here. It's always a nice detail to have. I just love these colors. They are fabulous. Truly amazing. These ones seem a little random, but oddly pretty satisfying. I like them. And then this version, you just stay very matchy-matchy for the suit. This is a style of Knight of Swords that I see in some of the Type 1 TDMs, like the Payen, and also in some Besançon decks. It's really interesting. Just kind of like you've had these chunky, cute horses for the whole deck, and then all of a sudden you get this more slender horse with really weird leg placement. So that's something I need to look at more and figure out where that comes from. Well, I think I remembered to tell you everything that I meant to tell you. I'm just doing this kind of quick after work, but pretty sure I remembered all the things. So this older version, again, is from the Cartomancer. She has a big cartel shop where you can order these. They're made to order, printed in the United States. It comes in this kind of like side opening box that isn't printed all that in alignment. This 1990 version of the AGM Tarot Classic is just labeled Tarot de Marseille. The guidebook is all in French and it's a vintage deck. I happened to find a really good deal, oddly enough, from a seller in Canada who, by the way, shipped it without wrapping it. So it was just loose in an envelope. A lovely person. I don't want to speak ill of them at all. We had some email exchanges and he reassured me that there wouldn't be extra tariffs and all that. But it arrived with the box kind of squished a little bit and the cards coming out of it. So very lucky that this vintage valuable deck wasn't ruined in shipment. But this one can be a little harder to come by. It can be pricey. You can find decent deals on it as well. The Tarot Classic also, of course, is out of print, but usually you can find them for like $25. This book is also pretty gettable. Although it's not, I don't know, it's worth having. It's interesting because it does, I mean, it features some really interesting decks and talks about some patterns, but you know, any of Stuart Kaplan's writing, you've gotta take with a grain of salt because in the 70s, you know, the history wasn't really hammered out very well. This one is Patrick Valencia, probably Joseph Henri Rochias, 1816, though we're not so sure about that date, so very interesting. But this deck is amazing. Just a beautiful cardstock, nice linen, high quality. So since it's made to order, it is a little bit pricey, but she has some really difficult, if not impossible to get decks available, and they're made to use on this lovely linen playing cardstock, which I think is really nice. So I think we cleared up some confusion today about the Tarot Classic. We probably also added some questions. Again, tarot history is hard to pin down, so if there's anything that I was wondering about in this video or anything that you know that you have to add to the conversation, please do down in the comments. I would love to hear about it. I'm so glad to finally have ordered this this deck. It's been on my wish list for so long. But then I found out about the 1990s one and happened to find a decent deal on it. So I actually ordered that one first. I was deciding between the two because they were about the same price, and decided I better go for this nice deal on the vintage deck, and I can always order the big cartel one later. And then a little time went by and I thought, you know what, I can't decide between these. I would really like all of them. So now I have all of them. I'm quite pleased. But if you know about some images that are confirmed to be from the actual Rochias deck too, also let me know about that. The British Museum one, I'm not sure which version that is, if it's the Schaffhouse version or the original. So do tell me what you know, and thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time.